Relax, sis. We've got the money, right, Sarah? What are you talking about? She's got $100,000 in savings, so don't worry. Sarah, we're counting on you. No. My name is Sarah. I'm a 34-year-old office worker, and I've been married to my husband, Sean, for 10 years. We had our daughter shortly after we got married, so she'll be turning 10 this year. While I don't have any major complaints about my marriage, I do have some issues, particularly concerning money. My husband has a habit of spending excessively on his hobbies. It's not the amount that's the problem, but the frequency and lack of restraint. I insist that he contribute a minimum amount to the household finances, which covers most of our basic expenses like utilities and food. With the limited amount he provides, I've had to cut back on spending and cover rent, our daughter's school tuition, and save for her future education from my salary. That's where my financial dissatisfaction comes from. Another issue is the housework. Despite both of us working, Sean doesn't contribute to household chores. He often claims that if he does it, it'll take longer, using that as an excuse to avoid it. This has led to me handling all the housework on my own. When our daughter was born, Sean was reluctant to help with her care, fearing he might accidentally hurt her. So I ended up managing most of the parenting responsibilities as well. As I reflected on my marriage, I realized that I was quite dissatisfied with my husband. Despite this, we had been together for 10 years, and our daughter was growing up. I knew it wouldn't be wise to consider divorce, especially with her approaching puberty. I tried to convince myself that no marriage is perfect and that disagreements are part of any relationship. However, a recent event made me reconsider. The catalyst was my sister-in-law. One day, she showed up at my doorstep unexpectedly. Sarah, I'm really sorry, but I need to hide out here for a while. What's going on? I've had some trouble with my husband. Can I stay here for a bit? What happened with Ken? She didn't answer directly and kept avoiding the question. Her vague responses only deepened my concern and made me question everything. I wasn't convinced by her vague explanations, so I decided to wait for my husband to come home from work. He'd arrived around 8 p.m., and after we had put our daughter to bed, we all sat down for a conversation. My sister-in-law, my husband, and I. So what happened? I asked my sister-in-law. Ken suddenly snapped and told me he wants a divorce. What? I was shocked. Ken had always seemed like a sincere man, so the idea of him suddenly getting angry and asking for a divorce was surprising. Do you know why Ken got so angry? Why are you asking me that? I just find it hard to believe he gets so upset without a reason, I replied. I noticed my sister-in-law seemed anxious, which only made me more curious. Sarah, why have you been defending Ken all this time? Are you involved with him in some way? Of course not, I said, trying to stay calm. I doubt it, my husband interjected with a laugh. She doesn't have time for that, and besides, she always leaves her phone on the table. Though my husband's defense was meant to reassure me, it only added to my irritation. I was too busy with work, house chores, and raising the kids to have much time for my phone. I rushed to make dinner after work, barely glancing at my phone. In the end, my sister-in-law couldn't provide a clear reason for her husband's behavior, so my husband and I decided to speak with Ken directly. When Ken arrived at our house, my sister-in-law chose to stay away to avoid the awkwardness. Ken greeted us with a polite apology. I'm really sorry for causing you both so much trouble. I had always known him to be sincere and level-headed, so his sudden anger was surprising. Ken, why did you ask for a divorce? You've only been married for a year. Isn't that a bit extreme? There must be a reason. Ken explained. She spent all my money without my permission. Really? How much did you have saved? I asked, stunned. $50,000, Ken replied. My husband and I exchanged surprised glances. $50,000 in just 1 year. That's roughly $4,100 a month. Considering that Ken had been providing enough money from his income to cover living and other necessary expenses, it was baffling to think of such a large sum being spent. It turned out my sister-in-law had been using the money for her own entertainment. Given the situation, it was understandable why Ken was furious. Anyone in his position would be, and I could relate. It would be challenging to stay married to someone with such a reckless spending habit. Are you okay? I asked, noticing Ken's frustration. Yeah, I'm fine, Ken replied. I thought about my own husband's spending issues. It seemed clear that financial habits might run in the family. If she doesn't pay back the $50,000, you should consider divorcing her. You don't have kids, so it might be a good idea. As I nodded in agreement, my husband abruptly said, "Okay, I'll make sure my sister pays you back." I was taken aback by his certainty and didn't quite understand where his confidence came from. Ken, however, simply said, "I'd appreciate that." With the conversation settled, I decided to observe how things would unfold. After Ken left, my sister-in-law returned home. "What did he say?" I asked her. "He said I spent all his savings, $50,000. Oh, I used it for living expenses." I tried to explain to him, but he didn't understand. But Ken said he had a separate account for living expenses. My sister-in-law snapped. "You don't know anything, so just stay out of it," she added harshly. She had always had a tendency to belittle me. Honestly, I agreed with Ken. If my sister-in-law couldn't manage her finances responsibly, perhaps divorce was the best option. Ken had made it clear he would only forgive her if she paid back the $50,000. "How can I possibly pay that back? I'm just a housewife," she protested. "If you can't pay it back, then don't spend his money," I said firmly. "Well, sis, relax," my husband interjected. "We've got money, right, Sarah?" "What?" "She's got 100,000 in her savings, so don't worry." My sister-in-law's eyes widened with interest. "Sarah, how come you didn't tell me about this sooner?" I was taken aback. "Wait a minute. How did you know about my savings scene?" "That money was something I set aside for my future when I was single. After I got married and had a baby, I intended to use it for our daughter's tuition. I never mentioned it to you. I found out about it when I went to your parents' house," Scene explained. The revelation left me in a state of confusion and frustration. "It was in the second drawer of the closet in your room," Scene said. "You went through my things without my permission? That's unbelievable. We're married, for God's sake. Anyway, your sister-in-law is in trouble, so we need your savings." "What are you talking about? I'm not giving it to you. That money is for our daughter's education. There's no way I'm handing over $100,000 just like that." "You've got 100,000, so give her 50,000. "Huh? Then why don't you pay her instead?" "Whoever has it should pay." "Sarah, please help me. I'm in the middle of a divorce." "That's none of my business. It's all your fault." "That's terrible. You don't love your family. Love for you means money. Then I don't need that kind of family love. If you don't give me $50,000, I'll divorce you," Scene declared, pulling out the divorce papers from the drawer. "Oh, so you've been preparing for this?" "I had them ready in case something happened." "You've got a lot of nerve trying to get your way." "That's exactly what I want to say to you," Scene retorted, filling out the form. "I'm serious. We can divorce at any time." My sister-in-law grinned as she watched the confrontation unfold. "Well, I'll be one of your witnesses," my sister-in-law said, signing the form with a smirk. "You can either pay me $50,000 or get a divorce," she added. I was baffled by how they thought they could intimidate me. I decided to play along and let the moment pass. The next day, I brought my in-laws and Ken to my house. "Why are you here, Ken? And Mom and Dad, what's going on?" I asked. "We heard the whole story," Ken said. "Scene, don't embarrass yourself," his mother advised. "Sarah, I'm truly sorry about my foolish son and daughter," his father said. "Ken, we also owe you an apology," I said. "Why are you apologizing?" My sister-in-law snapped. "Shut up," her mother said sharply. "We went through your room and found a lot of brown bags and jewelry." "How did you find out?" I asked, stunned. "Ken asked me to look into it," she explained. "You've always had a habit of hiding things you bought from us since you were a child." "I can't stay married to you after you lied about using the money for living expenses," Ken said. "I want you to pay back the $50,000 and get a divorce." "Oh no," my sister-in-law protested. "And Scene, you'll be getting a divorce too," Ken added. "What?" Scene exclaimed. "Sarah already filled out the divorce papers and I signed as a witness. We've already submitted them," Ken said firmly. "What? I won't allow this," Scene shouted. "Won't allow it? What are you talking about? You threatened divorce and demanded that someone who has nothing to do with this take on the debt. You're disgusting," Ken said angrily. "Sarah is my wife, not your property," he continued. "She's not born into your family. She's a stranger to you. and you should have more respect and care for her. When my parents-in-law confronted my husband with a solid argument, he hung his head, unable to respond. My sister-in-law seemed completely overwhelmed and just stood there silent. Thanks to my parents-in-law's intervention, the conversation went smoothly for both Ken and me, and we were able to finalize the divorce without any issues. My sister-in-law sold as many brand-name goods as she could, managing to pay back about $20,000. The remaining balance was covered by my parents-in-law, and she now has to repay them. Under their supervision, she works from morning till night in an effort to settle her debt. As for my ex-husband, I've requested child support. I heard that he now lives alone in a cheaper apartment, but his salary barely covers the rent, living expenses, and child support. Despite moving to a less expensive place, his habit of spending recklessly means he's always broke and has no savings.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.